Welcome back to the ANS Way. Today we are going to cover some of the pros and cons of living in the USA. And there's an actual reason why we decided to do the video like this today.
Yes, we had I think it's a new subscriber or somebody that hadn't commented before and just mentioned we had said what we liked about the UK, and I guess if you just watch that video, it looks like there's too many negatives about the US, and they actually said, I wouldn't mind if you could do a pros and cons. I did actually leave a very extended response under, which I always do, and we had a bit of back and forth, which was quite fun. And they didn't take it badly, and I didn't take it badly. It was just more of a case that if you watch that, it seems quite negative to the US, and obviously we've chosen to be here. We've not been forced to be here. So.
And interesting because anyone that's been following our videos probably knows how pro we are living.
Pro-US, yeah.
But the reason we decided to do the things we liked about the UK was and I liked your analogy of liking oranges.
Did you want that analogy? So what I did, I gave an analogy because the things that we liked about the UK were actually quite anti-US in terms of there's next to no gun crime. 60 to 100 people a year die through gun crime. There's 40,000 here, etc., etc. And what I said was, think of it like a fruit. For example, I could give you 5 really good reasons why I really enjoy oranges, and I could list them all out for you. For example, the vitamins, the colour, the taste, the fact you can make it into juice, etc. Now ask me the question, is it one of my favourite fruits? Absolutely not. It doesn't even feature in my top 10. It just depends on what you're focusing on. So I can make it seem like it's amazing. I can see all the positives. But actually, I don't particularly like eating oranges. I never do. She likes oranges. I don't.
I do like oranges. I like your orange juices.
Yeah, I do make. And the other side of that is pomegranates. They stain your fingers. They're really difficult to pull apart. They get stuck in your throat. You can only eat part of it and you have to spit it out. I prefer them over oranges. So actually, I could tell you all of the bad things about pomegranates, but I prefer them. So just because we say certain things about the UK are really good and we like them doesn't necessarily mean we hate the US or we put it above the US. We're purely here by choice. Celine was offered a role, but we didn't have to go. We came here because it's been something we've been aiming for 10 years plus. So we kind of balance out the positives and negatives of the places, the options that we had, and this one comes out on top for us. But we are very aware of the downsides of the US and just wanted to share those things with people.
And I'm just going to add that as you get to know Ant a bit better, you will know that he loves an analogy.
Yeah, usually ones that nobody
really
but
abstract.
me gets. My mum is always like, yeah, that's one of your analogies. Nobody ever gets them. So we're going to do our pros and cons, and I think I did about 5 of them. The one that we're going to start with is weather. So a pro of being in the US is the weather. Not because it's gloriously sunny here all the time. You get a choice. The US as a nation provides you with Vegas. Currently it's 41 degrees, I think, centigrade for the people who use the proper system. It's sunny 80-90% of the time. If that's your thing, you're welcome to come and live in Las Vegas. If you prefer mountainous regions or if you prefer the cold and the wet, you might want to move to Seattle. If you prefer something that's far more temperate, California. If you like the wet and muggy, which I do, move to Florida. And everything in between. You have full control and choice over the weather and the climate that you want to live in. And just, it's not really the con, but to give you the contrast of that, England, you've got bad, which is the south, to absolutely terrible, which is the north and Scotland. So you have no choice. You can have bad or really bad.
Yeah, and in the UK, you really don't know if you're going to get good weather or not. And unless you do like the cold and grey most of the time, it really doesn't suit you.
Yeah, so we never had a choice of how bad it is. So I would consider that a massive pro of living in the US or choosing to live in the US. And the second one is capitalism and/or opportunity. I consider it one of the same thing. What would you like to say on capitalism, Sal?
I haven't very little. I like to buy stuff, I consume things.
No, that's consumerism.
Not much to say on this.
Nothing to say on capitalism?
No.
Interesting. So you don't find this a pro?
It's not something I would think about, no, not personally. I wouldn't want to be in a socialist country, but it's not necessarily, when I think about the US versus the UK, something that it's probably far more capitalist, I think, about that, but it doesn't necessarily ring an extreme pro over the UK. But
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I consider
Not
the US
straight away, anyway.
the absolute epitome of a capitalist society, which I don't think the UK, it barely lives in a capitalist world. It's very left-leaning. So for me, and if you've paid attention to any of the stuff I choose to put out, which is heavily around finances and taxes, what this affords you here is the ability to capitalize on everything, on business, on ideas, on your energy, on your output, on your taxes. So you effectively run yourself like a business, and you can offset so much of what you do in taxes, which you cannot in the UK, because they see it as your taxes benefit also, basically just keep paying it. So for me personally, I see the capitalism as a massive pro, because it allows people like us, in my opinion, to really benefit from that, where before we are penalised for doing well massively. Here, in a capitalist society, they reward people that do better than not.
No, I think sometimes a blend is good. I think the issue with the UK is you're heavily penalised, but I think there's still a lot of opportunity to do well. And especially when you come from nothing or have very little, that's where the society really does pay you back. So it's just where you become, it really depends on your salary and where you're sat. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but I'm talking for me.
No, I know, I see. It's just like I said, it's not an immediate.
Well, that's interesting. So for me, it's one of the primary reasons why we're here.
Yeah, I think I would word it. It's different for me. I definitely feel having the choice on whether or not you want to input into the system and how much taxes you pay, and the fact that it's less here is definitely a benefit, because I was paying so much in taxes and I don't feel that I was getting enough in return in the UK for me personally. But then when I think about the capitalism side, yeah, I would have to think about it more. Just, yeah.
Interesting.
There you go.
So for me, pro capitalism, major pro. If this wasn't a capitalist society and quite an extreme one, I think it wouldn't feature on my list of places to be. That's how important it is to me.
I guess what I'm struggling with personally at the moment is, and I touch on this a bit in the healthcare videos, I really do look at the overall view of what you see in the society. So now I'm seeing the homelessness issue, the fact that if you end up with cancer here and you can't afford to pay your treatment, they will come after you for a huge bill. And that's where I struggle a bit, because that's what that capitalist society means.
I'll tell you what, stay tuned until the end and you'll see where capitalism comes up again. and so I made the notes on this video, so she hasn't seen it. So it's interesting that you're saying that. And there is no right and wrong in this. This is just literally my feeling over what I consider the pros and the cons. So we'll move on to number 3, which is the space. And it is abundant in the US. In terms of their population density, it's nowhere near as densely populated as somewhere like the UK. And what that then means is everything is cheaper in terms of land and property, just because you have more space to build on. For example, this home here, if you look at it on paper, it's not that far off, 4-bed, 3-bath, or 2.5 bath, from our home in the UK. The home itself is over 2 times the size in terms of square footage. It's got a garage that's 3 times as big, and the amount of land that it sits on is 2 times as big, would you say?
Yeah, definitely.
And the price of this when this was built, or actually the price of this at the same point that we would have bought our home, this was half the cost. Yeah. And that's not uncommon. This is actually quite a high cost area now. Las Vegas never used to be 10 or 15 years ago, but it's quite a high cost now, whereas a lot of the other states and areas are way, way, way lower than this. So the space and abundance is a massive, massive pro for me.
Yeah, and again, you can pick, because obviously there are more expensive places to live in the States, and if you're in, say, where we was originally going, we wouldn't have had this sort of space. We wouldn't have had such a large house going to California. And if you do have the option, you can pick somewhere that will give you that. Interesting, this week I went to the hairdressers and she was asking me questions about what it was like to live in the UK, and I was explaining about the typical house size in the UK, and I mentioned, lots of people live in 1,000 square foot or 1,400.
That's stretching.
Yeah, but for like a 4-bedroom home.
Yeah, maybe.
And she was completely shocked, as in, no, you can't live in that size.
And that's overestimated. I think I looked up the average, it's around 1,000. Quite a large, you're right,
well,
4-bed
I started at 1,400, and then I said, actually, no, it was about 1,000 for a lot of people, and then she was absolutely shocked, like, you can't possibly live in that.
There are apartments here, and these aren't even big apartments. The 2 beds are 1,100 to 1,400 square foot, which is the size of somebody's 4-5-bedroom home in the UK. So, space, I think it's hard for people to comprehend.
It's really normal, so they don't even question it. So for us, I had lots of people saying, oh, isn't that house too big for you? It's very normal here. And it now feels very normal to us.
So next up, we've got number 4, which is nature and landscape. Much like the weather, it's completely your choice. You can be up in Alaska where it snows, I don't know how much, but it seems like it's 365 days of snow, to the desert and everything in between. California has some amazing mountains, coastlines, beaches, all the way over to Florida, which has that very tropical, subtropical, very tropical feel and smell, and again, everything in between. So for me, and I wouldn't say I particularly love the desert. My natural tendency would be more towards California or Florida in terms of landscape. I like the dense green. I like to think I can ride my bike through the woods and the jungle rather than down the rocky terrain, but it does allow us to maybe be here for a couple of years and then go over to there.
Yeah, and it is a huge plus of the US, and that's why I guess lots of families will have vacation in the US, because they can go to so many different places without ever leaving and experience such different scenery, from Grand Canyon to the desert, like you said, the beaches, lakes, skiing. You pretty much can do everything in one place.
And in fact, we recorded a video just before this one, I'm not sure how that'll come out, and we went from the Strip, which is the Las Vegas Strip, which is completely man-made. If you've never been, you don't really grasp from TV the scale and how impressive it is, to Fremont Street, which has a lot of an older feel, more like a TV program or a film, over to the Lake Mead, which is actually man-made because it's a dam that creates it, but just beautiful people out on their jet skis, power boats, all the way to Red Rock into the mountains, which is where we live. And then 10 minutes from here, our last point was around the shopping centres. So even just within the state, there's so much to do.
Absolutely.
And we did that in the morning. We left home at 9 o'clock, half past 8.
So many different types of scenery just in one place. Las Vegas.
So if you get a chance, watch that video, and I'll link it depending on when it comes out. But you see the difference just in Las Vegas, not even Nevada, really.
Yeah, and I've always loved beaches and the coastline. So that was one of the things I personally liked about going to California originally. But I do know now that if we ever get bored here or end up trying something different, that we could be living by the beach somewhere here in the US. It's possible.
So it's point 4, but probably one of the more important ones, I think, for a lot of people. On to point 5, which is food choice.
We bring this up a lot.
It's just
very central to us.
And the thing that I noted down, the only thing I noted against food choice is anybody that thinks America has bad food or is only about burger and fries, and I know people like that, has either never visited the States or at least has not visited in the last 10 or so years. It's come a long way. I remember being in Florida over 20 years ago now, and there was some good stuff, but most of the places were, as you would expect, really low quality food. A lot of them as well. It wasn't just every now and again. It wasn't the cheap places. A lot of them were like that. It's massively different now. There's a lot of culture, a lot of foods that feel sort of like what you would get in the location. We eat a lot of Southeast Asian food, and it's exceptional. Not just here, I mean in the States. When we've travelled over, it's changed a lot.
There's lots of places now that you can go to in the States, whether it's California, Chicago, New York, Vegas, that have great mix, and their food scene is really, really good. But one of the things in particular about coming to Vegas was everyone mentioned about the mix of food. The other thing that I would say, linked to what Ant had just mentioned about the food availability since like 10, 20 years ago, even the food chains have changed now, where
adapted.
It's not your typical fast food. You can get really good healthy food, grilled chicken, and it's a real mix. So
Cater for vegans.
Yeah, and it's not this connotation of it being fast food or a chain that makes it bad.
No.
There's lots of good places now.
And just as a comparison, you have to be in major cities, in my experience in the UK, to get that. You need to be in the Londons, the Manchesters, the Birminghams, I would guess. I've not been there for a while. You, in the outskirts where we've always lived, when we bought our homes, you don't get that. It's kebab, Indian, Chinese, pizza.
Fish and chips.
Then fish and chips, always fish and chips. I know that's a sort of like a novelty thing here. People specifically go, it's very common at home. And that's about it. Those are the takeaways that you'll get in most towns and suburbs.
You literally can have anything here. I would say though, I'm guessing that depends on where you're at in the US, and I'm fairly sure that if you live in
let's pick Idaho, just because I don't know.
I don't know, Idaho. Some places in America that perhaps the food choice isn't as great. So again, it does depend. But the good thing is you can pick somewhere where the food is amazing.
That isn't going to cost you a lot to live there, because if you want amazing food in the UK, you need to live in London, and nobody can afford to live in London. Nobody. There's like 7 people that own all the homes in London. Keep having to take 5-minute breaks between things because it's so hot the camera overheats. It comes up with a little hot sign, so I have to go and get it said it's 40, 41. It feels hotter. But I have to go and get our floor fan and just blow it, but it just blows hot air, so I'm not sure it's helping.
Yeah, it's literally just like hot air blowing in your face.
So, on to the cons now. And I would say the primary con, which most people outside of America, because Americans like to pretend it's not real, is the crime rate here is horrendous. And what's scarier is they believe more guns, more force resolves. It's that doubling down effect. And you can prove it's not true by looking at the stats of any other Western civilization. It's in some cases, I think I've found 18 times the violent crimes of the UK, 18x per capita, not because it's got that many more people, and it's got up to 18 times, I think even more, the murders. And it's really clear when you're listening to the news, when you're getting the news feeds on your phone, when you're seeing it every day, it's really... firstly, it's hard to avoid, and it's really difficult for somebody from the outside to accept that the average person thinks that this is the right way to go about it. I
probably would avoid it if it wasn't for Ant. He's my daily news reminder.
Yeah.
He's like, killing up the road, not up the road, but shooting here, and then another mass shooting today. And I've got to the point where I now tell him, just tell me when there isn't a shooting. I don't need to know there is a shooting, because I assume that happens every day. Tell me some actual news. You know what? There's no shootings today.
It's just that which would never speak then. So I continue to tell her, but the statistics are just outrageous. The stuff that you see is terrifying for anybody from a European nation, and I would guess Australia as well. And I've had somebody try and justify it by comparing it to one of the most dangerous parts of Latin America, which tells you everything you need to know.
It's very, very strange that. And I mention a lot, I've travelled to the US quite often for holidays, but also a lot for work. And I used to come a lot to Vegas specifically. And I remember one particular trip, there was a shootout on the strip.
Oh yeah, there was
a club night.
There was a few,
and then the taxi.
They accidentally shot the taxi driver who ran people over, and then other people started shooting.
Ended up dead in that trip.
And these aren't anecdotal little things. To give you an idea, on average, there's 38,000 deaths by shooting. Currently, just gone into July. There's 232 mass shootings. So they are having them at a rate of over one a day. Mass shootings. Not shootings, there's 40,000 of those a year, mass shootings. And they are sure that more guns will resolve this. Now, every year they've had more guns for the last 10 years, and there's been more mass shootings.
Every year.
So this is why it's really difficult to get your mind around it. Now, what I did say to somebody that made a comment on our YouTube channel is, and I don't want to downplay it or diminish it in any way, the chances of you being caught up in that is still really low as a percentage, but it's not something you should pretend doesn't exist, because it does, and it exists in a factor of 10 or 20 compared to most other Western places. So it's something that I would say is a massive con for me, and it would have been the only thing that held me back.
Yeah.
And our families, both of our families questioned us over the US because of those things.
Yeah, and it's something I was, like I said, very aware of travelling here. But what I would say is, I know lots of people that are born and raised in the US, and as Ed said, the likelihood of something happening is still low, but then it doesn't mean you're not aware, because if you're watching the news, like Anne daily,
it's not the news, it actually comes
he gets on his feed.
I don't ever watch
yeah,
the
that
news.
would probably depress me, because it makes you very aware of what's going on.
It doesn't bother me because it's humans, that's the truth. I'm just aware of what people are, and the truth of it is, that's what happens. It doesn't affect me, and it clearly hasn't changed my opinion or mind on America, and the average American is just not that type of person, otherwise we would never be here. But I'm just aware that it is a possibility of something that you could run into.
Yeah, and something to consider if you do come to the US, whether you're going to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, because you are. If you do, I don't watch the news, but even in my update feed, which forces itself out every morning, you are going to see it. And if you do turn the TV on and happen to go on the news channel, it's going to be on there.
Yeah, I pretty much never put the news on here. I have no interest in it, and therefore don't subscribe to it.
Yeah, that's it. Just blinkers, like a racehorse, and you pretend nothing happens.
No,
Whereas I
you give
like
me
to be
my
aware.
you give me
Yeah,
my
that's
daily
true.
digest.
So next up is, it's much harder for low-income people or families here. And this ties in more with the welfare stuff that we've touched on before. The system, as we understand it, we're definitely not super clued up on it here, but it doesn't seem to take care of its citizens in the same way Europe does. And whether or not that personally affects me, it obviously does not, but it affects me in understanding the mindset of it. So it's a con overall. So if you're on a low income here, you're going to struggle a lot more than if you're low income in Germany or the UK or France even.
Yeah.
And you may find yourself on the streets, literally.
It's a very
We see it.
unforgiving system.
Very unforgiving.
And unforgiving in the sense of, if you're born into a low income family, it's very hard to get out of that. And also, if you fall upon hard times, then it's much harder for you to get out of that. So in the UK, where we do have a benefit system and you can get out,
There's a
of
big
that,
safety net, isn't
there's a
there,
safety
in Europe?
net. Here,
There isn't one.
it's
and
it's a struggle.
There's a couple of reasons I bring it up. One, because it's a real con, and two, everywhere we've been coming here for, I think my first time I was 13 or 14, so I've been coming here for nearly 20 years, and you close to that, 15 years maybe, and we've come here a lot. We see homeless everywhere, and it's in the States, it's a different level, as in a different number of, and not by a factor of 4, as the population should suggest compared to the UK, by a factor of probably 10 or more, and the level, it's hard to describe. It's a different kind of homelessness. It's not like you've fallen on hard times like the UK. It's really different here. So the drug use is very different. The way these people aren't cared for is very different as well here.
And also here, because there's so many, I was learning this week about how they come together. So there are homeless communities where they come together almost to protect themselves. So you will find dedicated blocks, like streets and blocks of homeless people, because they congregate together to protect themselves.
And one of the things,
Yeah.
actually, we were just at Fremont Street, and it's well known, there's a lot of drug use and a lot of homelessness there. What's scary is, as we've just mentioned, it's 40 degrees outside, and I would say we saw no less than 15 or 20 people, of which half of them are just literally on the floor, just in the street, no protection. Some of them had found places where they could sort of hide in the shade. And she said, actually, I don't know, I love the heat, but can you imagine having to live outside?
Well, I don't know
in
how they
this?
survive that
Yeah,
heat,
it's
because
rough.
they're clearly not being nourished correctly. They're not going to get water readily. So imagine being in that searing heat. Apparently, a lot of them live in the drain systems or the
underpasses,
underpasses of the freeway.
And the storm drains.
Storm drains, that's what I was trying to think of.
And this, I mean, we've jumped from low income to homelessness, but the truth is here, like you said, because there's no safety net, you are right on the edge all the time. If you're just about paying your bills and getting by, there isn't a safety net to catch you. Say you've got one person earning, if you stop earning, out. And where do you go? You rely on family.
Get ill, because once you've got that medical bill.
So that's where it's a lot harder. So that's point 2. Low income, straight to homeless we've gone. that's how my mind sees it, unlike Europe. Next one is point number 3, and that is the finance system here. It's archaic. It's honestly, if somebody didn't tell me this was America and we just had to experience the process of navigating, paying bills and utilities and getting bank cards, I would liken this to third world. It's that bad. And then they charge you for it as well. They charge you for the poor and slow service. So for me, it's a massive con and such a shock coming from the UK.
And I'm actually fairly confident that there are other countries that you would think of third world actually have a better
way more
system
advanced
and
than
more
here.
advanced than
Definitely.
here. This is what's shocking. And the more I talk to people, Americans, they will say that they give off this kind of look of, we're technology capital of the world, we're really advanced, our infrastructure is great, and they kid themselves. But then most locals actually admit, they're like, no,
yeah, we've spoken to people,
we know.
And there was I spoke to a guy from Dallas who was like, he said here in particular, he knows it's bad, but he said here in Las Vegas in particular, it's horrifically bad. And he basically said the people here are what make the system so poor. So that again is not a major, because you can work around it, but it's definitely a con that I'm aware of and noticing here. Number 4 is politics, and politics here is very, very divisive in a way you just don't feel in the UK. I've had people that have told me they don't speak to family members and friends if they vote for the wrong person or believe in the wrong political party. It's kind of like 6-year-olds in the playground, honestly, but these are real adults with real power. It's quite scary how divisive, especially if you see anything on the news. Their aim is literally to divide and conquer in the truest sense of the word. There's no attempt for harmony or coming together. It's literally...
Or understanding that people can have different opinions.
I mean, we have very different opinions over a lot of things, and we live together. Here it seems like you can't even be friends with differences of opinions. And our friends have very different opinions to us.
Yeah, in the UK it's a lot more common to be you can have difference of opinions, but here it's you're anti something.
Yeah.
You can't mix, and it's very core here. Having a political belief or view seems very core to who a lot of people are.
That's a good point, actually. There's 2 things here that have these core values: religion and politics. And this is why, I can't remember if I said it in another bit, but it feels like it's 100 years behind in terms of its democracy and its society compared to Europe, not just the UK. It feels like that. It's similar to how Ireland used to be, and I know it still is now. There is still that separation.
Oh yeah. That's a good example.
This is the closest thing we have to home, and I know that all over Europe that has happened, but you don't really feel that, at least in the southeast of the UK and parts of Europe that we've travelled to. You don't feel that, whereas you really do feel that here. And this isn't an attack on the individuals and peoples. There's tens, hundreds of millions of people that are perfectly normal and happy to live with people. It's how America promotes itself on its own news feeds, channels.
And it's just how
very
normal
divisive.
it is to end up in that conversation without you even influencing it or
Yeah.
trying to take the conversation. As an example, when we bought our car, the guy that was dealing with
mentioned that he doesn't like to even engage in conversation because he doesn't have super extreme Republican views, and he said that is not really tolerated in the dealership that he has because the senior management are very Republican. Which, I mean, come on, we're not 6 years old. That's
But it was
scary.
interesting that the conversation, and I don't think we did any. We said
No, it wasn't
to
us. He
lead
was
the
just
conversation, but then it was something that he brought
The
up.
reason he brought it up was because he said he actually prefers the European way of life. I remember because we're a lot more relaxed. We're not so gun ho, not so capitalist, and I think he preferred that. a little bit of irony in there because he used to be a gun shop owner and he was telling us how we can actually go and buy guns. He was like, it's sort of illegal, but it's also sort of legal.
Like literally within 3 days of being here, we found out how to acquire a gun here. We knew where to go, what border to cross.
Sorry, it's that three, isn't it? It's religion, guns, politics. Those three. You really, I mean, you could just be walking along picking up some asparagus, and if you happen to talk somehow, get onto one of those three topics.
Kind of linked back to what I mentioned about the news. I know colleagues here who have said to me they really don't like watching the news because they said all it does, it will send you crazy with whatever political view, violence, crimes, make you constantly fearful the moment you step out your door, even being inside your home.
Yeah.
So she was saying to me that she absolutely refuses to watch the news because she knows it's not good for her, and because it's almost like they're
it is
feeding
fear-driven,
you
isn't it?
what they want you to believe and know, depending on which news channel you're. And that's the other thing that's really funny here, depending on what news channel you might be on.
There's people comment on the BBC and how it leans whatever way. You haven't been to the States, you've not watched some US news. It's quite fun. I watch it for comedy.
Entertainment.
And I can watch it as an outsider. I find it hilarious. And I'll stick on CNBC, whichever, like CNN and Fox, so I can watch them both. And it's like a tennis match, effectively. So it's funny to us, but very divisive if you've grown up here. And I can see how it would take a toll on you after a period of time.
And something, I wouldn't say that I've watched the news in the UK and felt, obviously politics will be very much a part of it because that's how, it's inherent to how your country is. But then I could watch the news and just learn about some other things that's going on. But here, it's, you're watching the news and politics will be at the core
of it. That's the main agenda. And then our final one is...
Which I didn't know, by the way.
Yeah, final con is capitalism. So it's a massive pro, and Selena actually, what I thought was really interesting is touched on, when I said it was a pro, some of the points. So the downsides to capitalism is people like me, and this is the irony of what I have done, benefit from social views or socialist views or whatever term you want to phrase it. So I'm not going to get into the detail, but I grew up poor, and the UK system, funded for by taxpayers, allowed me to have free education, free healthcare, free meals if we needed it. We didn't, but subsidised our housing up until 15 years ago. Subsidised our housing for my parents, so it afforded me a really good life. I then went to a grammar school because if you have a certain level of intellect, intelligence, whatever, you're just tested and put into a specialist school.
Not based on your wealth.
No wealth involved. You get put into, and they drum this into you, a top 2% in the country's school. And that's all done through us funding through our tax money, which is the opposite of capitalism, really. So I do see that it's a massive con, because here, unless you have the funds, the wealth, the access, the people, you're really at a massive disadvantage in a way that you're not in a society that isn't so capitalist, which is why it was interesting what you said, because UK is a capitalist society, but it's just not that extreme.
Yeah,
it's the best blend.
It's not a fully socialist society in any way, but it's not fully capitalist. And I think, because just to explain, I had no idea what was on the list of pros and cons. So for me, I'm listening to it and when Ant mentioned the capitalist, I honestly was trying to think about, well, I don't want to agree straight away and just say, yes, of course, that's a pro, because I really was thinking through, and there's so many things where you have to think about the effect of what a capitalist society means in terms of the tax system, how the wealth is spread, the effect on the people, the ability for people to get out of certain situations, the healthcare. So that's why my mind, when you said that to me, what do I think?
Yeah.
I think my instant reaction is I couldn't say it was a definite pro.
No, it's definitely not. It's both.
But then I can see there are good aspects, but also there's the bad side to it, and which is where I always feel like the idea of a utopia blend in the middle.
There is a perfect blend, and there's also a crossover point. We've mentioned this in previous videos, and one of the points you said off camera is actually what I had down on my notes, which is pure capitalism allows for things like Facebook, and whatever your opinions are on it, Facebook, Google, and Co, all of those, Apple, have changed the way the world operates completely. In so many ways, it isn't just purely technology. And that is what is born out of capitalism. However, there's a darker side to that, a much darker side, in that if you just allow that to be, all that happens is the people with that knowledge and resource keep taking and shoot up, and then they will use the people on the downside, which is why, we've said it before, I've said it before, the UK is the perfect blend. But the UK stops being the perfect blend at a certain financial point in your life. And unless you truly believe in that system, in I don't mind how much you take from me if it benefits the all. And there are a lot of people that do believe that in the UK, and that's fine. And I understand why you might do that. But for me, I feel like we've never had wealth. So I'm at a point where I'm trying to create enough for our family or the people around me. I need that extra help. So we've crossed the threshold in which the UK benefits us now, and we've chosen to come to the States. And immediately, just by landing here, we're 40,000 better off. I'm unemployed. That tells you something. That's the difference.
He's my house husband.
Yeah, but I am, and we're still 40,000 better off. That's how this system works. So it isn't a totally selfish thing, and I've always said to you, I would never want to be rich alone, and I never want to have money alone. I want to be wealthy to allow my friends and family to enjoy life, and if they're in trouble, you can help them out. That's the point of it. So I'm not a completely capitalist, but capitalism allows it. It's like the most, it's like
I think, yeah,
it's so difficult, isn't it?
It is a difficult one, and why I said, and that's what I meant before earlier when I said I'm a consumer of it, because I know that I like the things that capitalism does bring.
Yeah.
And
this
I buy
your
things,
phone,
I
the
consume
Apple
things,
phone.
I use technology, I want efficiencies. That's what you get with that. So that's why I like, it's very hard just to say a hard and fast, but you're right in appreciating the pros and the cons as well.
And just to finish it off, the extreme of capitalism, and I mean, we see this, we could see it daily if we drove down. We don't live in that area, but we actually see people fishing through bins to feed themselves. I mean, literally fishing in a bin to get food or something that they can sell. And that is another byproduct of capitalism, which is why it fits in both categories for me. It allows people like us to earn and provide for other people. It allows us to have a safety net, not just for us, but also our family. But then the people that aren't in our position have no safety net because of capitalism.
I think I would say keep watching our videos, because I think you'll start to learn a lot about the both of us, whether I'm obviously expressing it more through the healthcare system, obviously something I'm quite passionate about, and then Anton through the finance and how to better manage your money. But at the core of it, we really try to bring in that kind of holistic view of how you're living and your quality of life and what's right for you. We're not saying what is right for us will be right for you. It's
right for everyone.
But what we would like to do is enable you to kind of dissect the different things and think, okay, what places put me in the best position?
What do I value?
Or what do I value? So maybe coming here, you might be financially worse off because the insurance and everything isn't best for you over the UK system with the NHS, as an example, especially maybe if you've got children. However, your quality of life for you and your family might increase. The food that you get, you might get a lot of joy from food. It's those things that improve. But your children might enjoy it more here with the weather, the free outdoor activities.
Oh my God, our neighbours' children are out enjoying every evening. They come out and they play, I don't know the sports here.
It's so
racquetball, rounders.
And you don't have to spend money.
Yeah. The mum sits out they have the garage open, the kids go out play on the street, it's nice and safe. It's stuff like that where you're like, okay, wow, this is a completely different style of living compared to what we know growing up in the UK.
So I would say it's just making a choice and figuring out what's better for you. And also, just try it. I would say life is for trying, and the UK is always going to be there. So why not try it? If it doesn't work out, you know what? The UK is always there.
That's it. So, if you found any of this useful or entertaining, make sure you give us a thumbs up, and Subscribe. See?
I was waiting for you.
And for anybody that
I was doing
hasn't,
the actions.
anybody that hasn't already, if you can subscribe, that would be great. Thanks.